Welcome to Art Share, the podcast for artists by artists, with your hosts, Brigid Ashwood, Ash Evans, and Mary Layton.
Guys, welcome back to another episode of Art Share Podcast. Today we're going to be talking about licensing versus manufacturing, independent manufacturing, creating your own products and getting them directly to your customer base. Let me look at my bullet points here. So is licensing where it's at anymore? I think for the three of us, the kind of the art community that we sort of came up in started really around LiveJournal, I'd say. Back in the day, the sort of fantasy art genre, which but encompasses a lot of other little mini genres and subgenres. But and for whatever reason, there was a big emphasis in that time frame, late 90s, early 2000s on. For me, maybe I'm not
I
really
wasn't there yet.
Date you a bit there, Ash. Sorry, I'm thinking
I wasn't there yet.
2000, 2001. Everybody was like, "Oh, I want a license, and I want figurines, and I want stickers, and I want to be in Hot Topic," and those were the goals. And I think in the 80s and the 90s, for fantasy artists, before the internet was so much of a cultural thing, it was definitely the fantasy artist or genre artist goals were things like book covers, magazines, getting your art on magic cards, in D&D manuals, right? Working for Tor to do covers, working for video games, concept art for Hollywood. That's where a lot of fantasy genre artists put their focus. And then in sort of the time period that I was first coming up, it was much more doing your own art, but licensing it into products, and that was how you were going to make your money. And I think now the shift for a lot of people that are brand new, I think is kind of cool, because they're not looking at licensing as much. They're just, we've got Patreon and Kickstarter and Facebook, and they're going just direct to their artists. And so what's the balance there? Because the old way, painting book covers for publishers is still great. That's maybe I shouldn't even call it the old way. Plenty of people still pursue that career path, and then there's licensing, and then there's just independent. So hybrid, should you do all of the above? And what's the benefits and drawbacks to each?
I think that can also be extended into artists and galleries versus self-representation. Also, I think it really depends on how driven you are. If you're the kind of person that wants to have an agent or somebody else handle all your stuff for you so that you're more free to just be creative and then have, the cards fall where they may be, then licensing is absolutely for you. If you're a more driven individual that's willing to do the legwork and has, the startup capital, or is willing to pursue like a Kickstarter or Patreon to accumulate that startup capital, then I think that that's absolutely the way to do it. I myself am finding now that my royalty checks are getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and the profit margins on the things that I make myself are getting larger and larger and larger, because we're turning into a self-made world with printing and on demand. We're makers. We're all makers now, and we have a lot more outlets to sell these things than we did when I first started. I mean, really, I think my first full-time year as an artist was 2007. So I'm coming up on my 10th anniversary, coming up. And here's Loki's butt, because that's what everybody wants.
You cat.
I know, right? But I think the thing of it is, it really depends on how much work you want to do, how much money you have, and how much space you have, because a lot of the things with manufacturing, for them to be profitable, has to do with minimums.
Yes.
Like for my unicorn plush, which is something that I'm working on now, it's this cat, little kitty unicorn rainbow adorableness. But for manufacturing, because stop it, don't laugh. Because of the manufacturing parameters, there are minimums involved. And the thing about manufacturing is, before you jump into it, you need to understand the process and how it works. For this particular project here, this fur will be very expensive. It's going to be long and fluffy and plush, and because it's so expensive, there's a minimum. I'm also having it custom dyed to match my vision, and that is a minimum, and so that feeds into it too. And you need to be informed and aware of processes and minimums and what you need to do, because as the volume increases, typically with manufacturing, the cost per item goes down, but your cost does increase. So I mean, a lot of things, like I've manufactured my own resin, I manufacture my own pins that I do it's called Pindemonium 4 times a year that my fans vote on. I mean, I do that. I've done sticker manufacturing. I've done a bunch, and now we're looking into plush, and all of them have different guidelines on how it's done, different minimums on what you have to do with ordering. You have to decide if you're willing to self-broker, which is a lot of fun, dealing with customs and importation and the fees associated with that, and screaming at people in New York City, and getting audited at the docks, because I've had all of those things happen, and things like that. I mean, I've imported from a couple countries. Actually, when I moved back from the UK, I've imported animals. I've exported and imported animals when I moved. I've imported and exported stuff to the UK, and I've imported stuff from China, and it's a completely different animal. The learning curve is very steep and very, very expensive. So you really don't want to screw up. So triple check everything before.
So start small.
Yes. Start small. Start American made if you can. Like, my sticker manufacturer is in America, and it's Breeze, because I hit a button and then they send me crap. And there's no trying to talk to a supervisor in Mandarin. There's no one asking to speak to my husband or brother because I'm a woman. Little fun fact about me, I go by Ash Evans because it's androgynous. And I found when I was first getting started with manufacturing, especially I was doing resin, they didn't want to talk to me because I was a woman. And they did not think that I was really the person that was making decisions. Right. They were asking for my father, my husband, or my brother.
Right. Nice.
In an email. So, I mean, they weren't even speaking to me on the phone. Obviously, when they speak to me on the phone, they know that I'm a woman.
Right.
Well, maybe they don't. I don't know. But just initially, if they go by Ash Evans, they always assume that I'm a man. I have fans that assume I'm a man, which is hilarious.
I don't get it. Like, I haven't met a lot of men named Ash. But okay. Right. Yeah, I don't know a lot of guys that paint unicorns either.
It happens all the time.
It's so funny.
You have to understand that there are also cultural things that you're going to run into. Chinese New Year is a big one. A lot of people don't understand that factory shut down in February. Right. For Chinese New Year. Right. That delays shipments globally for at least 15 days.
Right.
And there was some other person that's manufacturing soon, and I can't recall who it was, and I wouldn't name and shame them anyway, but they were incredulous that these people would dare shut down and put their production. I'm like, that's their culture.
Well,
that's
most
their
of
holiday.
Shut down for August too, or something. Isn't that vacation month? Or is that just
Yeah, in Europe, I think we take
Europe.
August off.
Yeah.
And Japan, I don't know about China. I feel like Chinese New Year is the time where they just kind of, it's like their winter break and they shut down. There's also,
go ahead.
There's also a huge trade show in China for factories and manufacturing in February. So pretty much February is a wash.
Right.
But these are things that you need to think about and be aware of, especially when you're dealing with a culture that you're unfamiliar with. And manufacturing in the United States is always admirable. And I do it as much as I can. But that's
also always much more
5 times more expensive. And it's funny because
sorry, go ahead.
Everyone wants American me, but nobody wants to pay.
They don't want to pay
Nobody
it.
wants to pay for the prices.
And that's the thing. I indie publish, Oracle decks, and I do both of yours. And I get very frustrated. Our Oracle decks are $30 retail. 50% of the net profit on the retail price goes to my artists. 50%. I'm paying my artists a very large chunk of the profit of each deck that we sell because that's the kind of publisher that I want it to be. But that's why the deck is $30. Each deck is also half handmade and assembled. And as much of it as we can have printed and manufactured in the United States is, and I'm a woman-owned business, just me. I don't have any full-time employees. And so I get a little annoyed when people complain about the price because you know what? Don't buy it. Don't buy it then if you don't like the price. But you know what? The same people that are moaning about the price that maybe we're $5 or $10 more than other Oracle decks that are produced entirely in a different country from major publishers and manufacturers who also, by the way, are paying their artists a pittance that is almost a crime because traditional publishing is designed to screw the creators and profit the gatekeepers. So I'm getting a little heated because it really pisses me off when people make ignorant comments. Thank you for the duck there, Ash. I appreciate it. It really pisses me off when people make ignorant comments about the pricing of our decks because you know what? They are artisan and they are special. And actually, you don't have to agree that they're special. Don't buy it. What's more, send it back to me. I'll refund your money. I always find that shocking. Like I never hear from anybody that, they just want to go and, say something stupid and ignorant on Amazon rather than contact me and say, you know what, I'm not satisfied with this. Can I return it? Because the answer would have been, sure, send it back. Okay. But, I don't think $30 is unreasonable for what this product is. And also when you consider that I'm paying my artists a very fair wage or royalty, I should say. And so please keep that in mind when, just as a consumer, that if something seems a little pricier to you, you have no idea what went into that and what factors were important to that artist to produce it. And I tell you, if they're an American-based business, and if they tell you that most of it was produced in the U.S., that's why it's so much more expensive. And you can't sit here and complain about Walmart putting small businesses out of businesses and about jobs going to China, and then at the other side of your mouth complain about how much stuff made in the U.S. costs so much more. So like,
and you don't support small business because you're shopping at Walmart.
Right. So
I mean, my unicorn plush is actually being 50% manufactured in America by Americans. Mm-hmm. And I'm also using a factory in China that has been checked and accredited to be child labor free, and their conditions are fine. And I've seen photos of the workers and they look happy and they have fans and they have really good light and the whole thing. That's more money. If I wanted some sweatshop where people were losing limbs and all this other stuff, I would be making sick money.
Right.
But that's something you have to keep in mind if you want to manufacture yourself. And that's also something you want to keep in mind if you're licensing, because you don't know what their factory conditions are or anything like that. If you can vet a company as much as possible, you should do so, because you don't know if that resin manufacturer is using children if you don't do due diligence.
Right.
So on both sides, you're going to need to do some legwork and research and just really think about
or
what,
don't. I mean, or don't. If you're a jerk, you're a jerk and you don't care.
or don't care and have it be like the India like incense industry where people are being held against their will and forced to work 20-hour days.
Yeah,
if that,
you know, or don't.
We're not judging you at all.
No judgment here.
Judging you at all in that decision. No.
Who cares about your carbon footprint? Right.
Yeah, screw that. So, but I mean, I'm very pro manufacturing, especially now with Patreon. I've done so many GoFundMes for pin manufacturing. I think I've done 17 successful ones like that at Kickstarter, and I think that now is the time. If it's something that you were going to do, you have so many kids today have so many opportunities. It's ridiculous.
They do.
Back in my day, I didn't have Kickstarter. I had to just make my money and do it. You know,
to create a resin figurine, we had to go hunt the plastic bunnies ourselves. Slaughter them, hang them up to dry.
I have a warehouse full of resin figurines because I had to order X amount of minimums, and I dealt with all that stuff. And I mean, I could do a whole show about how to import your crap from China.
Right. I'm sure we will. But backing up a little bit, because we sort of went down like a social justice warrior tunnel from there. But backing up just a bit, and no, it's fine. I just was remarking that we did. But come with me.
If I don't feel self-righteous at least once during this thing, I'm not doing my job.
No, it's fine. I'm just thinking, let's back it up for a second, because the licensing versus first with the decision making. Okay. Where, you know, I sort of gave like 3 different tracks, and we won't talk about like, you know, book covers and all that stuff, the more traditional thing. And we won't talk about galleries today. This is just licensing versus manufacturing. But first in that decision-making process, the thing about licensing, you have to consider, okay, first you have to find the company, and really finding the company, that's a lot of legwork. You can go and find an artist that you look up to who has licensing that you admire, and try to figure out who the licensing is from. Then you Google for the.
Don't email them.
Please don't email them and ask them.
Email them and ask.
Right. Google, you know, let me Google that for you. Use Google. Find the website of the company, and then if you're representing yourself, it's just about calling or emailing until you get a hold of someone. I never had any problem with representing myself as someone else too. Okay. Like for years I had an assistant that had a different name than me. And I have no problem with that, because it can, every company's different. Some companies prefer to work directly with the artist. Some don't. They want a buffer. And so you just never know. So if it was, I used to have like the assistant, and she would email them, so that if they were a company that wanted that buffer, it was fine. If they didn't, then I would say, okay, well, I'm going to now, you know, hook you up directly with Brigid, and you can talk to her directly, and that's fine. But what you're looking at with licensing is you're looking at a contract. So you're going to need either an agent or an attorney or a really smart friend to look over your contract. You need to think about in your contract the things that you want in there. For instance, I think I was working with several companies before somebody pointed out to us that we might want to put a clause in there about if something happens to me, who gets, you know, what's the protocol, who would they continue paying there? Just, you know, I'm sure it could have been handled after the fact, but why not just go ahead and have it in the contract to begin with? Okay. And then, you know, royalty rates are very, very small. 5% off of retail is kind of typical. I've seen like 2% off of the wholesale price. If I get 10% off of the retail, I think I'm doing pretty good. You know, now everybody, you know, you can always try to negotiate. There's always different terms for bestsellers and for artists that are, you know, that are superstars. But for the rest of us, it's probably going to be around 5%. Then you have to look at little details of like, okay, do they offer returns? And does that then eat into your royalty? So if they, you know, if you get paid and then they take money out because somebody returned a bunch of product, are you going to have to cut them a check? Or are they going to just credit that, you know, deduct that from future royalties? Or how is that going to work? And then also the other thing is artistically, with licensing, I really think that there's some creative compromise that you have to be prepared for. And I've found that, in my opinion, artists that do better with licensing are artists who are happy to be hands-on and give feedback to their manufacturer, but have realistic expectations and understand that the book is always different from the movie. And so what you painted or what your vision and dream of whatever this product was going to look like in your mind, it's going to be different once it's realized as a completely different product. But then I'd go a step further and I'd say the smart artist who really pursues licensing, which I do. So that's, I do independent stuff, but I also have a lot of licensing. And what I finally learned, maybe a little too late, but is that it really makes a huge difference when I'm designing for licensing, or when I also work flexibility into my art from the beginning. So, which is obviously very easy to do when you're working digitally, because you can have layers in your Photoshop file or your Corel Painter file. You can, crop and adjust things a little more easily than you can with traditional work. But what's more, if you are skilled with the computer, and if you can offer to the manufacturer that, make a deal with them, have a conversation that you will alter the artwork for them. I'm so sorry, guys. Somebody is calling me. That has never happened. Okay, there we go. So if you can, if you can make a deal with them, that you will adapt the artwork for the product, okay? Because I always cringe when you send your file to someone, your digital file, right? And you have it in layers, okay? And you've got all these lovely layers where, you've got sort of a subtle glow behind the artwork. And well, who knows how it's going to look on their screen, or if they're going to mess that layer up and turn it to multiply or soft light, and then it's going to turn into this weird like white glow instead of a pretty glow, or they're going to flatten everything and stuff is going to go haywire, or they're going to crop the product, the image inappropriately for the product so that it looks like crap. So if you have a good eye and you can make a deal with the manufacturer, I've never had a manufacturer turn me down when I have said, okay, yes, we're going to work together, but I'm going to make the artwork for this mug or for this t-shirt or for this journal, okay? Or we're going to work together to get the best possible look for that, because they want you to be, well, a good manufacturer, in my opinion, wants you to be involved in that and wants your feedback and your input, because they respect what you're doing and they wanted your art to begin with, right? What's more, it's safer for them, because if the product doesn't do well, then they can blame you.
They don't have to pay someone to lay it out either.
They don't have to pay someone to lay it out. And frankly, I think that that's a good way to be a control freak. I mean, I have been so much happier with the things where I worked closely with the manufacturer. I have one manufacturer I work with now who we do a lot of different products with them, and they're always coming back to me for tweaks and stuff. And you can't be precious about it. It's not my baby. I don't want to cry, but I'm looking at it for a product, for it to be the best product it can be. And we make the changes that are appropriate to that. And everything sells better then. And in the past, I had another manufacturer who I worked with who, for 2 runs of products, they did a really good job. Then after that, they went way downhill and they never contacted me about anything. I never saw anything. Stuff went fully to market. And I was surprised and only knew about it because I had a Google alert on my name. I had never seen the prototypes, the sculpts, or anything. And it was absolute and total trash because they completely missed the mark on the concept of this piece. And so it was too far. So yeah, the book is never going to be the movie is never going to be as good as the book, but this was just, it wasn't even the same book. Okay. It was terrible. And then I got blamed, which I thought was pretty hilarious because at no point did they have me involved in the process. So that's the thing about licensing, is that it's, the people do it because of expanded distribution. A manufacturer can probably reach more customers than you can. And so the trade-off is that you're thinking you'll make more money because of volume. Okay. The thing is that whether or not that happens is
really 50-50 because I would say
upon the economy, it's contingent
Yes.
upon their customers, their existing customer base.
Yeah.
Adding a fantasy line to a company, especially that doesn't have one at all, it's probably going to be a lot less profitable than if you're
Right.
adding to something else. There are a lot of contingencies. I've noticed presidential elections affect the economy and purchasing and licensing. And the more uptight people are about money, the less likely manufacturers are to take a risk on you or to look for new licensing. I mean, there was a point in time a few years ago where they weren't licensing anything at all.
Right.
So those are all things that you have to keep in mind. And everything is going to translate differently.
And licensing's harder these days because of the internet. And it's easier to find the companies that you want to license to, but there are so many artists out there. There are so many good artists, and there's always somebody on Tumblr, a DeviantArt, who's just as good as an artist as you and who is willing to license with them for a lower royalty rate. There's tons of, a lot of factories are just using in-house artists in China. They're just finding talented people, giving them a job, and they're not paying them a royalty. They're just putting that art on there. And what's more, they're getting on the internet. They're looking at Amy Brown. They're copying her style, and then they're putting it on the art. And it's still going to sell because the consumers, sorry, I'm stuttering, consumers just want pretty pictures, okay? And so the weird thing is when you're making the decision versus licensing and manufacturing, and not that it's either or, but the same factors that are in your favor to succeed at licensing are the same factors that are a good argument for just doing it yourself. You're more likely to succeed at licensing if you have a large fan base already and people know about your work, that it's going to sell better and it's in demand and it's marketable. Well, you know what? Those are all the same arguments that you'll probably do well just doing it yourself. And you will you'll make more money.
Oh, exponentially. One of the reasons I got into resin manufacturing is I had a licensing contract with a resin manufacturer. They did a crap job. But my contract, I negotiated that I got final say on anything that they put my name on. And there was a point in time where there was one particular dragon that looked like garbage. And this woman was like, just sign it, just sign it, just sign it, just sign it. And I actually got a CC that I wasn't supposed to get where she called me the B word because I wouldn't sign off on this figurine because it looked like garbage. And I said, you know what? They got their line. I think they got like 5 pieces or something, and they were gorgeous, and they actually still sell. Like to this day, like a decade later, I still have some of the licensing with them. I said, to hell with this. You people don't know what you're doing. I actually used the same factory that they used to make my resin because I just started talking to them. That's what she fobbed me off on the China factory because she didn't want to deal with me anymore. That was a mistake because I got to talking to that manufacturer, and then I ended up self-manufacturing 12 pieces. And let me tell you something. The royalties from the company over the cumulative decade that I have had with them didn't even add up to my first month of sales. Of doing it myself. I had to put up a fair bit of capital. I had to put up several $1,000s to have these items made. And this was before Kickstarter. I mean, this was just money off my butt. And if it didn't...
These are the factors, though, for the mid-level working artist. If you're a bestseller and you're an outlier, then you're not even listening to this podcast. So if you're the James Patterson of the art world, we're not talking about you, okay? Laura Roberts can always renegotiate her contract for like $1 bajillion. But yes, the middle of the road, then yeah, and you can start small. We've been talking about figurine manufacturing. Maybe, we can talk about other things, okay? Like coloring books. Well, these days with independent coloring books are huge. And with independent publishing, like say through CreateSpace, okay, you can publish quite easily your own coloring book and sell it on Amazon and order your own copies and sell it wholesale or directly to your customers. There is no minimum order. The prices are phenomenal. Before that, because that's only been around since 2010, 2011, Amazon CreateSpace. Before that, I had digital coloring books where people just downloaded a PDF and they printed it out. And yeah, there was some piracy and some people shared it when they shouldn't have, but they still sold and they did well. And my coloring books I only have 3 coloring books out, and they are a significant chunk of my monthly income now, just these 3 coloring books. And that's actually, there's very little money investment or time or learning curve to do, say, something like Amazon CreateSpace. There's tons of tutorials online, and there are very affordable independent contractors that can do it for you if you just can't even figure out like the inside, how to do a PDF interior or whatever. And then like, what's another one? Stickers. Ash, you were saying like stickers, t-shirts, even starting out just with like a Zazzle or a Cafe Press or a Redbubble or Society 6 or who else, a bunch of even starting out with a shop like that. They're doing all the work for you. You're just formatting your images to put them up on the products. But that is independent, manufacturing and publishing at that point. So that's a great way to start if you don't have to go straight to like figurines or anything.
Yeah, print on demand is fantastic. And figurines, I think, were my very first large-scale international manufacturing thing. But yes, before that, I did have a Cafe Press, and then I moved to Zazzle. Those go in waves. Like Cafe Press used to be huge, and Zazzle used to be huge. Now Redbubble's huge. So you got to just ride the tide.
And their customers, their customer service, because I've been with Cafe Press for some things, and then with Zazzle for other things, and I would go back and forth depending on who was messing up badly these particular 6 months versus that one, And actually, that's another thing too. I won't say what it is, but you keep in mind, you can have a Cafe Press or Zazzle or Redbubble shop or whatever, and the price range on the products, the cost to the artists really vary. Some of them make more sense than others. But you can have the shop, a little shop there, or account, I guess I should say, and actually not make it public, but instead buy the product yourself and sell it directly if you want to. And I have one product that's a bestseller for me that's what I do. I have Zazzle manufacture it for me, but I sell it myself for, a lot. It's worth it. Perceived value, it's worth it. But it's different. If they were going directly to my Zazzle shop and getting it wouldn't sell the right way. I know how to market it better than the Zazzle shop does.
I know several artists that buy tote bags and stuff from Redbubble and sell them at shows and things like that. So, I mean, it's not, you don't have to buy 3,000 units of something. I don't suggest you buy 3,000 units of something ever, unless you're going to move them. And one thing I will say about manufacturing is every time I invest money in a product, I assume it will never sell at all. And I don't do that to be a pessimist. I do that to be a realist, and I need to be aware of the fact that sometimes it can take many, many months or years to move all of the product. It's not just the second you get it in your hands, it's instant money. It's not. It may never sell. It may take 6 months to sell. It may take 6 years to sell. So if you're going to make a financial risk, make sure it's a financial risk that you can take. Assume that it's never going to sell. You'll be pleasantly surprised when it does, and you won't be enduring hardships because you made a decision like that.
I've had a lot of people ask me about dye sublimation, having your own dye sublimation set up at home, because for a while I did. And what I've told them is don't start with the dye sublimation kit. Instead, buy yourself a heat press and buy yourself a printer that can do like 13 by 19, a nice printer, okay? And then buy oversized heat transfer paper, okay? The 13 by 19 size heat transfer papers from a professional supplier, and you have your professional heat press. So this should all cost you like less than $1,000, okay? Then from there, you can do t-shirts, tote bags, and other things without dye sublimation. You'll be using heat transfer, but more commercially produced products on the market, like at Walmart or JCPenney or Macy's or whatever, there's nothing wrong. Don't call it iron-on transfer. It's not. It's heat transfer, okay? And tons of commercially produced things, mass-produced things, use this same process to produce the product. Okay. So there's nothing like, low rent or tacky about it. It's still professional, but it's a much cheaper investment of money. And you can still make a lot of the same products that you would be doing with dye sublimation. They will look better because dye sublimation blurs out the lines on all artwork once it's put down. Okay. Whereas heat transfer does not. And even if you just started with, say, like mouse pads and tote bags, t-shirts are complicated. That's a time, because you always have to keep in stock tons of them, and you can really only iron on or heat transfer the image onto light colored shirts. Dark is like a whole different ballgame. So I stopped doing t-shirts, and actually now, like, everybody has to figure out for themselves like what they're going to do. And from time to time I do tote bags, but mostly I do tarot bags, or like little gift bags, I call them, but tarot bags for tarot cards. And I sell a ton of them, and it's the only thing I heat press anymore. And yet it's still totally worth it for me to have this equipment. I did dye sublimation. Some people do it and love it, but I wouldn't start there. If you do heat press and transfer, it's a smaller investment. You can still make a lot. And then you're not dealing with all of the blanks that you have to buy to do dye sublimation and all of the breakables and ceramics. I cannot stress enough. I do not think it's a good place to start with breakables. Like we just like went all in. We didn't know. We got everything, and we had tiles and coffee mugs and all this stuff. And I quickly realized that it wasn't worth it. I hated it. I would rather
just, how many did you break before you even, oh my God, breakables suck all around.
That's why I want that like little ping of the handle popping off in my sleep. Ping.
You're like, money every time.
I know.
little dollar bills flying away.
Yeah. So that's the thing. Start small, Yeah.
And maybe if you have a 1-bedroom apartment with a toddler, a heat press might not be the best thing for you to have. It's all going to be what your lifestyle can accommodate, what you really think that you can do. I mean, it's great to have t-shirts and this and that, but it's just, at the end of the day, it's just stuff. It's just stuff that's going to eventually end up in a landfill. You have to decide for yourself what is going to be valuable, and don't buy into the feeling and the ego of having a booth full of all this stuff. It doesn't matter. It's only worth something if it sells.
Yeah, and what's more, that's a good point, because you have to look at your product line as an overall as well, because I had to learn that sometimes there are products, like you might have a product that sells a lot. That doesn't mean you should keep it, because it might sell a lot, but it costs you the same to manufacture it as it does as this other print, and it's cannibalizing sales from to like direct your customers to the stuff you want them to buy. So it took years of experience and trial and error, but now I'm constantly every year reevaluating my product line, and I need to be making a certain amount of profit on something, and it needs to be holding its own and not stealing sales from something else for me to keep it. Because the problem is like mini prints that we always used to see. Everybody wants mini prints. Well, they expect to pay less for a mini print, and it costs me the same amount of money to make it. So that's why I don't do it. It costs me the same amount of money, and you want to give me less money for it. No, sorry, it's not available. Then buy the full size one.
I just had the conversation with a customer like
Mm-hmm.
But calendars are the same way. I do the Fortuna calendar, and instead of people buying the 12 prints at $15,
right?
They buy $20 and cut the prints up and frame that.
Yeah, I totally feel you. That's how I feel about calendars. I do them like I don't really like, and I feel the same way about art books. Like, I don't know. I'm not sure that they're such a great idea, but our half hour is up, so we'll have to save that topic for another time. And thanks for listening, and we'll see you guys next time.